So let's talk about, what does the word absolute value mean? Does anyone know what that means? Absolute value. Yep, it is the distance from zero. That's a definition that is important to know. Absolute value is the distance from zero. And because it is a distance, whenever we talk about distance, distance is always positive. So if I say, well, how far away am I from the window? I'm not going to say, oh, I'm about negative 25 feet. We don't use the negatives when we talk about distance. If I say, well, how far away do you live from Target? Oh, about negative 8 miles. Like, nobody says that, right? So when we talk about distance and absolute value, the number is always positive. And that's really important because we're going to graph absolute value functions today. So looking at these two numbers, 17 and negative 83, I just want you to write the absolute value of both of those numbers for questions 4 and 5. So what would the absolute value of positive 17 be? Just 17. So the absolute value, and this is how you would write that, absolute value. Those two bars, that's the symbol for absolute value. So two straight lines around the number, that's the symbol for absolute value. And it has to be on your desk. Okay. So the absolute value of 17 is 17. And then the absolute value of negative 83 is positive 83. Okay? So we're going to keep that in mind as we start to graph. So in your rebuild book, please go to page 51. And we're going to graph an absolute value function. So if we could take out our earbuds and put away our phones for the next few minutes while we learn this new material, and then we're going to spend the majority of the class working on homework 6. Now, did we start that together yesterday? Yes. So we're going to work on some of the ones in the back. So we're going to talk about that today. All right, so let's go to page 51. So this is a graph of an absolute value function. Oh, it's always during this class period. Thank you. Okay, so this is the graph of an absolute value function. Notice the equation. So the equation for absolute value is y equals the absolute value of x. See those double straight lines? That means I'm taking the absolute value of x. And whatever the absolute value of x is, that's going to be y. What letter of the alphabet does this graph remind you of? A V. And that's what all graphs for absolute value look like. It's not like a parabola where that one looks like a U. Absolute value is pointed. It looks like the letter V. All right, so let's talk about some key things about this graph. This is called the parent function. The parent function. First of all, this is the equation. We're not going to focus on how to write that as a piecewise. Okay, so the equation is y equals the absolute value of x. The domain, this will never change. So if you are asked what is the domain of an absolute value function, it's always, this is always going to be the case. It's always going to be all real numbers, which is written as negative infinity to infinity. Okay, so what I want you to do, and I know you have limited space, but off to the side on page 51, you do have under where it says think about it. Off to the right, you have some lines where you can write a parent table. So what I want you to do is create your parent table. And your parent table will be the order pairs for these 5 numbers. So I want you to write the order pairs for these 5 numbers. And this parent table, that's what you're going to use when you graph your homework and when you take your test, which is a week from today. So we don't need to do we only need 5 good numbers for our parent table. So I picked these 5. Let's pick it right in the middle of the graph. So what is the order pair for this point? What does X equal and what does Y equal? Does everyone see that? I want to make sure, because I need more than one person to get an A next Friday. Okay, so here, X is -2, Y is +2. So that's going to be your first point. So how did we get that point? We took X equals -2 and we took the absolute value of -2. The absolute value of -2 is +2. So now let's look at this point. Go ahead and write the ordered pair. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to write the ordered pair for these other 5 points. And this is our table that we're going to use over and over again. All right, so what's my next point? What's the ordered pair for this point? -1, 1. What's the one after that?
0.
And then after that?
1.
And then after that?
2.
Good. Notice that all of these numbers are positive, right? Because that's what absolute value means. My X values, I have negative and positive, which is why my domain is all real numbers. But for this side, which is your range, what's the lowest number on this side for your Y? 0. And the other numbers, are they bigger or smaller? Do they go, so we go 0, 1, 2. Are the numbers getting bigger or smaller?
Bigger.
So my range, see how this says, this might be confusing, all non-negative real numbers. So another way to say that would be Y is greater than or equal to 0. But in interval notation, that would be 0, bracket on the 0 to infinity. So we're going to graph one function, and we're going to actually graph the one at the very bottom of page 51. So I'm skipping over example 5, and I want us to do the check at the bottom. That is what we are going to graph. And that's actually our only question, and then we're going to start working on a couple homework questions together. So on Monday, we're going to talk about AH and K. Who remembers AH and K from Algebra 1, or just in general, AH and K? Does that sound familiar? The A, the H, and the K? Okay, so we're going to talk about it today, but don't worry. We're going to also talk about it Monday and Tuesday. So I'm just kind of introducing it today, but we're going to talk about it a lot more next week. So here's your transformation form for an absolute value function. A is always in front of the absolute value. And then I have X minus H. H is the tricky one because that's always inside and you have to flip it. And then we have our K value, and that would be a plus K. Okay, so looking at this function, this is an absolute value. Let's identify AH and K. So A is the number in front. Now when you don't see a number in front, if you don't see an A value, A cannot be 0. So A, when you don't see a number, A is 1. H is always inside, but you flip it. And this is where students usually get confused because they say, oh, H is -1. It's not -1. It's the opposite. This is the one we have to flip. So what's the opposite of -1?
1.
1. And what's K in this equation? K would be what? Positive 3. All right, so what I'm going to do is rewrite that parent table that you have written above. And what we're going to do is apply our transformations to the table. And when you apply transformations, this never ends. This does not go away. Lex, can you put that away for me, please? This never ever goes away. But when you apply your transformations, you always add the h to x and multiply y times a and add k. So we're going to create a second table. The table that I create in blue, that's the table that we're actually going to graph. Okay, so what did we say h was? 1. So what I want you to do is pick up your calculators and let's just do our x first. Add the h value to all 5 of the x values in our parent. So you're going to add 1 plus negative 2, 1 plus negative 1, 1 plus 0, 1 plus 1, and 1 plus 2. And give me those 5 numbers right here. So go ahead and do that. Take a minute. So 1 plus negative 2 would be what? And then 1 plus negative 1?
0.
1 plus 0?
1.
1 plus 1?
2.
1 plus 3?
3.
1 plus 2, sorry. So 1 plus 1 is 2, sorry, 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay, so now let's do our y transformations. For your y transformations, we have to do 2 things. The first thing we have to do is multiply it by a, which we said was 1. And then we have to add to that k. So go ahead and pick up your calculators if you need to. Take each one of these 5 numbers, multiply them by 1, and add k. So take 2 times 1 plus 3. 1 times 1 plus 3. 0 times 1 plus 3. Now this is not a one-to-one function because you will have repeats on this side. Remember, the definition of one-to-one is nothing can repeat, but you are going to get repeats. So go ahead, take a minute, get your 5 numbers, and then you're ready to graph. So what did you get? What is 2 times 1 plus 3?
5.
1 times 1 plus 3.
4.
0 times 1 plus 3.
3.
And now we're going to start repeating. So the next number is 4 and the last number is 5. Go ahead and plot these 5 ordered pairs. We got a little bitty baby grid, but it's big enough. Plot these 5 points on our graph. So put a point at negative 1, 5. It should look like the letter V. Then put a point at 0, 4. Then put a point at 1, 3, 2, 4, and 3, 5. It's going to look like this. That is your graph. So now we have to talk about our domain and we have to talk about our range. So I'll give you a minute to finish graphing and then we'll talk about domain and range. So the domain, going back to what we said at the beginning, the domain, that's pretty easy because this is always going to be your domain. Your domain for every absolute value is negative infinity to infinity. So let's go ahead and fill that in. But your range is going to change. And the range is going to depend on your y. Because when we go back to the parent table, notice that the smallest number was 0. But now looking over here for the y side, what's the smallest number over here? 3. Does everyone see that? This is my smallest number, and then all the other numbers are bigger than 3. So my range is going to be bracket 3 to infinity. All right, take out your homework 6. We're going to get started. We're going to do the hardest question. So we're going to do the hardest question in homework 6 together. And then you should have the confidence to do the easier ones by yourself. If you don't have graph paper, work with what you do have. I don't have any more pieces. I have given them all away. So take out some paper. If you don't have graph paper, you're just going to use paper, any paper, and we're going to start homework 6. Definitely not taking a nap because you got a test a week from today. I already got all the little columns ready in Skyward to be filled in. It's next Friday, whatever that date is. Okay. So what I want to focus on, couple of things. I did change the due date to Tuesday, August 23rd. The deadline to submit homeworks 1 through 7, which is 350 points, is Friday, August 26th, and that's full credit. Okay? So what we're going to talk about in the back of your homework, starting at question 13, these 4 questions are graphing absolute values, which is what we just did. And I'm going to do the hardest one with you, and that would be 17. So again, use whatever paper you have, and we're going to graph number 17 together. Okay, so question number 17. So homework 6, number 17. We have y equals, well, it says f of x, but you know that's the same as y. 2 times the absolute value. This is on page 54. So look at page 54 in your reveal book. 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 plus 6. This is our equation. And the only reason why I say this is the hardest one is because A, H, and K, we actually have an A, a H, and a K. So A will always be the number in front of the absolute value. What is the number in front of the absolute value sign? 2. H is always inside, but you have to flip it. So it won't be negative 4, it will be positive 4. And K, 6. So again, using that parent table, this is our parent table for absolute value. I'm just rewriting that table again. I'm going to actually do it at the top of the screen so that everybody can see it. So the parent table is the table I had you write off to the side on page 51. This is the parent table for an absolute value function. And this will always be the parent table. So what I want you to do with these 5 numbers is you're going to add the H. And H is what?
4.
So pick up your calculators. Let's go ahead and do that right now. Add 4, add 4, add 4, add 4, all the way down. And then on the y side, you're going to multiply it by a and add k. So a is 2, k is 6. So I want you to go ahead and pick up your calculators and come up with your new table. So you're going to take 4 plus -2, see the first x value. 4 plus -1, 4 plus 0. So let's go ahead and do this side first. Focus on the x. So take 4 plus -2, get your first number. 4 plus -1, 4 plus 0, 4 plus 1, and 4 plus 2. Let's go ahead and get these 5 values over here. So 4 plus -2 would be a positive 2. 4 plus -1 is 3. 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. 4 plus 2 is 6. All right, now let's look at our y values. 2 times 2 plus 6 is 1 times 2 plus 6. 0 times 2 plus 6. And then we have repeats, 8 and 10. So let's go ahead and graph it. We're only graphing this table right here. So using the paper that you have, whatever graph paper you have. Let's go ahead and graph it out. That would be your graph. So again, just graph it on line paper. If you don't have graph paper, just do what you can do with what you got. We're not finished though. Because homework 6 is a little difficult and I want to make sure you all are ready for the test. Because the test is coming up fast. So then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to try to see if you can figure out the domain and the range of this graph. Now the domain should be easy. See if you can figure out the range. So what's your domain going to be? All real numbers, negative infinity to infinity. What about the range? What's the lowest y value, Kenna?
6. 6.
Bracket 6 to
Infinity.
positive infinity.
You got it. That's it. All right, so I'm not going to graph the other ones with you. We did 17 because 17 is the hardest one. The only thing I want you to do, because the process is not going to change, let's look at questions 13. And I want you to look at 13, and I just want you to write next to it what the A, H, and K value would be, because that's the hardest part. So looking at question 13 on page 54, what is A going to be? That's the number in front of the absolute value.
1.
1. H,
5.
positive 5 or negative 5?
Negative.
So always flip it. That's the one you flip. H is the one you flip, so it would be a positive 5.
So when H is positive,
If it's positive in there, then we would make it a negative. So you always flip the sign of H. And what's K? 0. So you're going to do the exact same thing, except you're going to add your H, which in this case is going to be 5. And then on this side, you're going to multiply by 1 and add 0. All right, what's the next number? 19. Let's look at question 19. Because you all can graph these on your own using the rest of the class time. But looking at number 19, what would A, H, and K be? What's A? 19. Looking at number 19. That's the next question we have to do. 19 has a 2 in front of the absolute value. Now notice that there's nothing inside that absolute value, which means that there's an invisible 0. So H is 0. And K is actually also 0 for number 19. And then the last one is number 20. A, H, K. So what is A for number 20? H, 0. K, 1. All right, use the last 13 minutes to finish out this part of homework 6. It's not due until Tuesday, but you want to stay on top of it as we get ready to finish up module 1 and get prepared for our test, which is next Friday.